Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Intentional Disc Golfer Podcast. We're excited to have you join us on our disc golf journey. This podcast explores the physical, mental, and technical aspects of disc golf performance. We will also be discussing tools and techniques to improve your disc golf game as we work on improving ours. Now, here are your hosts, Brandon and Jenny Sapinski.
And thank you once again for listening to the Intentional Disc Golfer Podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Brandon.
And my name is Jenny. And Brandon, what did you recently celebrate?
I am the ripe old age of getting my second ace.
No, you celebrated your 40th birthday.
My 40th
Congratulations.
birthday. And a second ace. I got a birthday ace.
Yes, you
Wasn't
did.
quite birthday, but it was close enough.
Yes, congratulations.
All right. Well, if you enjoy this fine broadcast, appreciate us, love us, can't stop listening to us, go ahead and support us on Facebook and Instagram at Saprinski Disc Golf. That is CZUPRYNSKI Disc Golf. And on our Twitter page at the IDG Podcast. That is at the IDG Podcast. And I want to remind you that this fine broadcast, I keep saying that, it's a fine broadcast.
It's a decent broadcast.
Decent, yeah, that's right. We'd like to remind you that this program is supported by listeners like you, and we are in a new sponsorship season, Jenny. So if you would like to become a sponsor on the show, have us out for a live event, or if you would like some... Stickers, that's right. What color are they this time?
They are still neon green.
Neon green stickers. Just give us an email at theintentionaldiscgolfer@gmail.com. That is theintentionaldiscgolfer@gmail.com.
You can reach out to us on Instagram or Facebook, and I would be happy to send you a sticker or two. You can also order from us at Trioctopus Treasures at Etsy, and you'll get a free sticker with your order.
Yeah, we have a bunch of dyed discs up there and some special editions that you can't find anywhere else, and all custom dyed. So check us out, Trioctopus Treasures on Etsy. All right, Jenny, you have some important events coming up. We are in the off season, but important stuff is still happening.
So we have published the tentative Evergreen Women's Series. Big news this year, it is presented by MVP Disc Sports. So MVP is the overall sponsor for the Evergreen Women's Series this year.
And would it be correct to say that this is the first time that the Evergreen Women's Series has had a big sponsor for the whole series?
Yes. And a lot of things are in the works. We are working on streamlining a lot of things, making it consistent through each of the different activities. What are they called? Why am I blanking?
Tournaments?
Yes. So trying to make it consistent through the different tournaments. And this year we will also be over in Eastern Washington. We will have our first event in Eastern Washington. So it's looking like February is going to be at Kayak Point, March at Tall Firs, April at Fort Steilacoom. May is the Women's Global Event, which happens every 2 years. That's going to be at NAD. I will be hosting Shelton Springs, Sirens of the Springs. It's already up on Disc Golf Scene at the lovely Shelton Springs where the Silver Series was. That reminds me of a tongue twister from childhood. Ladies of the Lake's going to be in July at Lakewood, Evergreen Fling in August at the Evergreen College. And then our new event will be over at Columbia Park in Kennewick in September, with our Queens of the Jungle finale at Fairgrounds in October.
Kitsap Fairgrounds.
So very excited for the 2024 season of the Evergreen Women's Series.
Yeah, and I can't blow it up enough. Please come out to the Sirens of the Springs at Shelton Springs. That is Jenny's tournament that she puts together every year, not every year. She started last year. But that's Jenny's tournament that she's putting together, and let's blow it up and get a bunch of people there and make it totally awesome, as well as the rest of the women's series.
Yeah, if you have any ideas of what you think would be a fun mermaid game, during a disc golf tournament, let me know because I'm looking for some ideas for some mermaid games.
Or if you want to donate something for like the raffles or for the prizes or anything.
Oh man, the raffles are going to be legit this year. MVP has donated a lot of stuff to all of the events. So there's going to be, I think, baskets, discs, all sorts of other things are going to be given away this year. Thank you, MVP.
Yeah, and guys out there, come out there and support your wives and your girlfriends and your significant others, your daughters also. We can't say this enough that grow women's disc golf. It's a big deal, and it's really nice to see these ladies out and having a good time.
Yeah, you didn't say it, but I mean this in the non-rudest way possible. Support your mom. Like, your mom might be out there disc golfing because...
Support your mom.
That's what I said. Yes.
Yes, that's not a mom joke.
No. This sport is for everyone. It is not just for the youngins. There's lots of older women out there. And I've seen a lot of ladies out there recently supporting their men at their tournaments. And I'd love to see you guys get out there for one of the tournaments this year. It's going to be a really good year, I think.
Yeah, the women's series is going to be off the hook this year. I'm excited for it. That's how awesome it's going to be.
It doesn't take much to excite you when disc golf is involved. Also, talking about events, recently we had Paul Gowder from powwows.com over at Chief Kitsap Academy, and he started powwows.com years ago, and he was one of the main sponsors for the Paul Macbeth Foundation with our disc golf course that is at Chief Kitsap Academy. And it was lovely to have him and his wife out playing some disc golf. My husband was able to take them to do a round. One of our teachers, Baron Old Coyote, who's been on our podcast, he was able to go out there and play a round too. And they have a nice interview that's going to be coming out. So check out powwows.com if you want to hear that interview about disc golf.
Well, and the other thing that was extra awesome, besides getting the ace, was that you guys were doing ocean to table during that time too. So not only did he get to go around and play disc golf, but got to participate a little bit in the ocean table and witness that.
Yep, it was my first year running Ocean to Table, which is a project that Chief Kitsap and the Suquamish tribe proudly put on for their students, where we get to go fishing with our students, go through the process of processing the fish down at Suquamish Seafoods, and then we smoke and hang the fish at our smokehouse on campus, and then go down and work with some more of the community members and can and store the fish. So it's a huge, huge project. Looking forward to watching it grow more and more as the years go on. But it was super exciting to have them there during that time. It was also exciting to hear that my husband got an ace. However, I told him I didn't see it, so it didn't count. I did go back and see that it did get caught on camera, so I guess it did happen.
And powwows.com, they also are a sponsor on the Pro Tour, aren't they?
Yes.
What it was, Leah?
It's Leah.
I can't say her last name.
Neither can I.
And I don't want to butcher it.
Yeah.
But Leah, I guess she's a Navajo descendant player on the Pro Tour.
Yep.
So that's really exciting.
And I believe we met her at Shelton Springs. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure we met her.
I think so.
I think I have her signature on my disc. I
Probably.
still can't find which one, whose is whose.
But that's super cool to get to know those guys and play with those guys. And, hopefully they'll come on the show eventually and talk about powwows. Like, that would be really cool to have them.
Yeah, we're looking forward to having them on our podcast soon as well.
All right. So this episode, Jenny, you know how we keep saying, don't listen to us, we're not experts, talk to your doctor, whatever. Well, we went out and found an expert. In fact, we went out and found the expert, and he's going to be a guest on our show right after a word from our sponsors.
Hi, this is Jenny from The Intentional Disc Golfer. Want to improve your putting game? Well, so do I. Target Putt is the best way to help you get better at putting. This simple little tool increases your awareness of location, your distance, and your aiming. It's a highly visible target that allows you to focus better, aim more precisely, and dial in your distance. For less than the price of one disc, you'll have a durable target that you can use wherever you practice. It's really easy to use. Clip it on, step back, and start making better putts. Unclip it, clip it to your bag or cart for future use wherever you go. We all know that you drive for show, but you putt for dough. Have better rounds, better scores, putt with confidence, and finally fix the putting part of your game. Try Target Putt. Make every putt count. Available at golfsidesports.myshopify.com.
Hi there, this is Brandon from the Intentional Disc Golfer podcast, and I want to talk to you about Disc Raptor, the ultimate disc cleaning tool. I have one attached to my disc golf bag, and it keeps me playing my best on those wet and sloppy days. Then when I'm done, I can just flip it inside out, throw it in the wash, and it's that simple. Disc Raptor is made from tough materials for durability, but its microfiber and soft scrubbing insides are gentle on your discs. Disc Raptor is also a U.S. owned and operated company. I've spoken to the owner, Colin, personally, and this is an entrepreneur that you can trust. Get yours today at discraptor.com. That's DISCRAPTOR.com. Disc Raptor is a proud sponsor of the Intentional Disc Golfer podcast.
Hi, this is Paul Wright with the Paul Macbeth Foundation. Support the Builders Club and support the Intentional Disc Golfer.
And we're back. Thank you for listening to the Intentional Disc Golfer. On this episode, we have an excellent, super special guest. I am way excited for him, for us to have him on our podcast. The whole premise of this, and Jenny, you said it kind of last episode, was making the transition from a disc golf player to a disc golf athlete. And this man is on the forefront of trying to change that paradigm and that culture within disc golf. Sir, if you would mind introducing yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. I am so excited to be here. Thank you, Brandon and Jenny, for having me. My name is Seth Munsey. I am the founder and owner of Disc Golf Strong, and I'm also the Director of Health, Safety, and Sports Performance for the Disc Golf Pro Tour. And I also work on the medical committee for the PDGA, chair that. And I'm just really excited to be here and talk with all of you about health and sports performance and being an athlete and all the good things that comes with, you know, our great sport of disc golf. So thank you again.
Yeah, super excited to have you on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Seth. So I guess let's start right at the beginning here is how and when did you get into disc golf? I mean, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when I think back to when I first started throwing a Frisbee, I wish that YouTube was around or the internet was around at that time so that I would have been exposed to disc golf a lot earlier. I'm 42 now. I started throwing a Frisbee probably when I was 8 years old. My uncle, I used to play with him a lot. And then I grew up on the beaches of Southern California, and my brother and I, my friends, we would throw Frisbees every single day, outside the house, at the park, at the beach. We were playing object golf at that time in the 90s without knowing what disc golf was. And I fell in love with flying discs and did it all the time. And I still remember one year someone telling me that there was a sport called disc golf, and that it was about 40 minutes north of us in a place called Huntington Beach, California. And I really didn't know much about it. And I asked my parents if they would take me up there, and they said, no, we can't take you up there. That's too far right now for us to take you. And so I never went up there, and I never got exposed to disc golf in the 90s. And I really, and Huntington Beach is famous for being Paul Macbeth's course. And I've talked to him about that and told him that story. And I remember throwing a golf disc in probably like 95 and with my brother, and it just faded so hard. It dumped so hard. And I'm like, what is this? I have no intention of ever throwing this thing ever again. I can't catch this behind my back or underneath my leg as I'm jumping through the air. So I kept with Frisbee, played a little bit of ultimate Frisbee at college later on and years later. But when I got to disc golf was when I moved from Southern California to Northern California, and I owned a gym. and it was called Iron Republic, and it was all about lifting and being strong and functional movements and all the things that are around just human movement, optimizing human movement. And they had disc golf courses up there. And so when we moved up there, I wanted to find some things to do. And so I got on Facebook, typed in, different clubs, and there was a disc golf club, the Monterey Stinging Jellies. And I thought, wow, I remember hearing about disc golf a long time ago. And so this was, I think, 2011, 2012. So I went out to the disc golf course, met some people, started throwing, and just fell in love right away. And, never looked back. And I was playing all the time out there on the course. And it's been something, that has gone from being just a passion of mine to a career of mine, and still a passion of mine while it's a career of mine. And I'm just very fortunate to be here. And I look back over my journey, when I got out of high school, I joined the military, joined the Coast Guard, and I was up in San Francisco, and I lived up there. And looking back now, there was disc golf courses around, like near where I was staying at in Northern California. And I'm like, man, all those years I could have been playing these awesome courses. And that's in the past. I can't dwell on that, but I would have had probably 25, 30 years of playing disc golf right now under my belt. But yeah, that was my journey into disc golf, and it's been a great one.
I have a very similar story. I grew up I played disc golf with my dad, or not disc golf, Frisbee with my dad. And I was always near disc golf courses, and I had friends that would play disc golf, and I did everything I could to stay away from it. And we didn't get into it until COVID, and we have the 5 kids between us. So we needed something to do and just fell in love with it. And now it's kind of our big passion, our obsession. Yeah.
I love it.
So, Seth, can you elaborate a little bit on your time at Cal State Fullerton, summa cum laude? That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's funny that, like, when I went to college, I had no idea what to expect when I started, because when I was in high school, I was not a great student. I barely passed high school. I think I had the lowest GPA you could get when you were to graduate. And so I went off to the military, and they don't allow you to just be 18. They really teach you how to, be reliable, be responsible, a lot of the different things that I wasn't a bad kid. I just didn't do a lot of homework, and I didn't study, and didn't really enjoy school, and really didn't think that I didn't have a growth mindset. I had a real fixed mindset at that time in high school. And so the military kind of made me grow. My job was search and rescue and law enforcement. And so I had to be actively engaged and push my boundaries on what I could do and what I thought I could do. And so when I got out, I went to the fire academy, thought I was going to do that. Didn't. Worked on an ambulance for a couple of years doing 911 stuff. And then I went off to Cal State Fullerton and decided to use the GI Bill, to do that. And so I fell in love with training. While I was working on the ambulance. I started exercising, trying to just improve my life and my health. And so I found something that I could tap into, a passion of mine. And so when I went to college, I thought, you know what? I was not a good student. I barely graduated high school. I wonder how I'm going to do in college. And I had such an amazing time. I had great professors. My degree was kinesiology. And Cal State Fullerton is one of the top kinesiology programs in the United States. So I was very fortunate to be in an environment of success and higher learning, and really pushing the boundaries of kinesiology and exercise science and health and nutrition and all that. And because it was tapped into my passion, I graduated top of my class, summa cum laude, for like 400 students or something. And it just really kept pushing me forward. And I, eventually took that into disc golf. But at that time, while I was at Cal State Fullerton, I was attending a fitness conference in Long Beach, California one time. And I went, and I was waiting for the conference to start. I got there the day early, And so I met up with a friend that I met online who was a strength conditioning coach as well. And so we met for a beer, and I sat down at the bar, and there was this gentleman to my right, my friend was to my left, and we were talking, and I was talking to him about, different programs I was doing, and he was doing the same. And I mentioned that I went down to San Diego to do this kettlebell program and be like they call them victims. Like you could show up for a free kettlebell lesson. Yeah, it was a Russian kettlebell,
That's
RKC. Russian
strangely fitting.
Yeah, right. And so you could get a free lesson if you show up on Sundays, because the people that were going through the kettlebell certification, they were going to coach you. And so they had to one of the things to pass their certifications was they had to coach fresh people that were just showing up for a lesson. And so I drove down to San Diego to do this. And so I was telling my friend this, and the gentleman to my right, sitting there enjoying a beer, he stopped me and said, "Hey, you went down to San Diego for this kettlebell lesson?" And I said, "Yeah, it was a great time." And he said, "I got certified at that kettlebell course." And I thought, wow, that's great. Yeah, I had a great time. How'd you enjoy it? And, we got to talking, and he said, "My name's Sean Skane, and I'm the strength coach for the Anaheim Ducks." And I was like, "Wow, Coach Skane, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've listened to your podcast and everything." And that kind of turned into that day. He offered me a position to work at the Anaheim Ducks with him as an intern assistant strength coach. And so that was a really big turning point in my career, to where I went for a beer with a friend and ended up as an intern assistant strength coach with the Anaheim Ducks. And I got to learn a whole lot there during my time, and learned what it took to train and work with elite athletes, and kind of a lot of the misconceptions around training athletes at the highest level that some might think. And it has really shaped what I do in disc golf with my athletes now. And so I really value that experience. And there's a whole lot I could say about, Cal State Fullerton and the kinesiology program, and, and everything I learned there, but I'll wrap it up there for Cal State Fullerton. But I left there. I had a job opportunity to stay with the Ducks, and decided that I didn't really want to travel that much for work and be gone that often, because Sean, who ended up moving off to the Minnesota Wild as the strength coach there, he was gone all the time. He was gone, missed a lot of anniversaries and birthday parties for his kids and all that. So I thought, I'm not going to continue that route. And so declined his offer to stay, and went and opened up my own gym instead, Iron Republic, for those 4 years before I moved into Disc Golf Strong. And it's kind of ironic that my job now with the Disc Golf Pro Tour has me on the road for 9 months of my life working in professional sports. But yeah, that's kind of a little snapshot of my journey up to starting Disc Golf Strong. And then I started Disc Golf Strong in 2016. I kind of started working on it in 2015, started it very beginning of 2016. And it just, there was no one really talking about these topics about performance and being an athlete or anything at that time. And, I felt like with my background and my love for disc golf, and seeing my fellow disc golfers out on the course not performing the way they wanted to during their rounds, and having injuries and challenges that they were facing, I thought, hey, I've got a background in rotational sports and in strength conditioning. This is what I do for work. This is my passion. Disc golf's my passion. Let me start putting content out there. And so started doing that, and started, traveling around for disc golf. And I started partnering with the Pro Tour early on. And then in 2021, they asked me if I would just come on and work full-time for the tour. And so I've been working full-time for them since 2021 up until present.
That's very impressive. That's quite the journey.
That is quite
thank you. Yeah, it feels it's interesting, because I'm still young. I'm 42, and I spend most of my time around 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and they're like, they're like, they're like, so what'd you do before this? And I just kind of give them a little snapshot, and they're like, what the? And I'm like, you don't, our journeys, we don't, it goes by quick. It feels like it was just yesterday, all of this, up to this point. But I'm very grateful for the journey that I've had.
Yeah. So as a teacher myself, I heard you talking about yourself as a student, and that you didn't have you had the fixed mindset, and now you're more of a growth mindset. And I know that when we spoke with Eric, he was talking very highly about your ideas on mindset and how that applies to the course. Do you have any tips that things you'd like to share with people about mindset out on the course?
Yeah, and Eric's great. I'm so glad you got to, spend some time talking to Eric. I've been working with Eric since probably 2017. Him and Tino, when Tino was working full time as a disc golf athlete, and so it's been great to see his journey, as well as other athletes' journey through not only their physical performance, but their mental performance and as well. And so there's so much to tap into on mental skills and all that. But the first thing I would say is for everyone is I identify as an athlete. And I know, Jenny, that we kind of talked a little earlier about that, about being an athlete and being a disc golf athlete. And that was the first thing, my very first video, I'm pretty sure, that I put out in 2016 was, I said, hey, disc golf athletes, because I wanted to make it clear right away from the start that we are athletes, whether we're pro, whether we're amateur, we're athletes. We're doing an athletic movement. Even if we don't think we are, the demands on our body are high stress, high tension. There's so many demands that we could talk about, but really to sum it up, we're an athlete. And so if we think of this as a hobby, we're going to treat it like a hobby. And not that that's bad, but that can increase our risk of injuries and not performing at our best, and not mentally performing at our best. But if we think of ourselves as an athlete, prepping ourselves makes sense. Training makes sense. Thinking about improving your mental game makes sense. Because that's what athletes do. So that's the first thing, is really identifying as an athlete. No matter how long you've been playing, no matter what your rating is, or even if you have a rating, you're still an athlete. And then on the mental side, there's mental health, mental skills, mental performance, and the first thing I say is I'm a huge believer in mental health. You gotta work on your mental health, because I've worked with people that were they were trying to work on their mental skills, and their mental skills got better, or they were able to more easily tap into mental skills training when they worked on their mental health, as far as like meditation and getting enough sleep and having a growth mindset. Because mental skills training and mental performance on the course, it's not as easily accessible, and can feel not attainable when you have poor sleep, and your brain is just thinking about all these different things that are going on in your life, and you're really stressed out. And so people are like, why is my breathing drill on the course not working? Well, it's like, well, you're so tense and everything because you've got a lot of good stuff going on in your life that you need to kind of put some focus into. So first is focus on your mental health. Meditation, mindfulness, read, work on a growth mindset, all those things for mental health side. And then mental skills training. There's a lot that can be said about mental skills training. And it depends on how deep you want to go into it. But I'll say two things. I'll just cover two things on mental skills training. First, before I say those two things, I'll say there's a lot of great books out there. There's so many good books, and I've read a lot of them. I've done a lot of different mental skill stuff. I was not a professional athlete, but I was a professional under pressure when I was on the ambulance and in the military doing my job there. So I had to be able to show up, do my job under pressure when it counted, and then recover from that afterwards, and to be able to do it again. And so I lean heavily into my mental training from the military and the ambulance into how I coach my athletes through mental skills and performance training. And so the first thing I'll say is with the books is I talk to a lot of people who say, oh, I've read this book, I've read that book, and I haven't seen any benefits from it. And like I said, I love books, but I'll ask them, say, what's 1 to 2 things you got from that book that you are actively, doing in your routine, off the course, on the course? What are you implementing? And a lot of times the response is, it was a really great book. I say, I agree. That's what that is. I'm sure, no doubt, that's a great book. But you gotta take away some things and actively work on it. So we work on our putting, we work on our driving, we work on backhand form and forehand form and all that. Mental skills is something we need to work on, just like we work on putting, just like we work on all those other skills. It needs to be addressed off the course so that it can be put into practice and used on the course when it counts. So one thing that we think about is not trying to control the uncontrollables. I talked with Eric about this. I talked with all my athletes about this.
Yeah, he spoke about that on a podcast. Yeah.
Oh yeah, great. Because if you try to control the uncontrollables, it's never going to go the way you want it to go, because we just can't. We can only control what we can do right now. My sports psychology professor in college, Dr. Ken Ravizza, the late Dr. Ken Ravizza, he was amazing. He was one of the foremost experts in the world in sports psychology. And I was very fortunate to be around him and take his class, which was one of the most stressful classes I've ever taken, which is funny because we would open up with meditation and close with meditation every day. But he was so old school, he wouldn't use a book. He just talked. He didn't even use slides. And then his graduate assistants would give us the test based on whatever they think they had written down. And so we would have to take these tests, and we'd be so stressed out. You trying to use these mental skills techniques while we're trying to take a test in mental skills and performance class, sports psychology class. And be like, did he even talk about this? And, it's like, I think maybe the graduate assistant just decided to put this question in there, But anyways, Dr. Ken Ravizza, he worked with Blue Angels pilots. He worked with neurosurgeons. He worked with professional athletes all over. He worked with all sorts of high-level performers. And he worked with the Angels baseball, which was down there near us. And he would tell us that during spring training, he'd be working with pitchers. And he would see that the pitcher on the mound would be getting frustrated, they'd be out of the strike zone, and it was just building up. So what he would do is he would walk out with a ball, and the pitcher would already have one ball in his hand, and he'd hand him the second ball and say, okay, the rest of the time today, I want you to throw both of these balls at the same time. And they would say,
what?
Well, Coach, how am I supposed to be successful throwing 2 balls at the same time? And he said, well, you're already throwing 2 balls at the same time. You're throwing one mentally that you just threw, and you're trying to throw this one that's in your hand. You can't control what happened before. You can't control what your next pitch will be. You can only control what's going to happen with the ball in your hand. And you can't even control it once it releases. All you can control is what you can control. So if you're going to try to throw 2 balls mentally, you might as well throw 2 balls physically, like at the same time, right? We can't control that. When I was doing search and rescue, there was a lot of things that I couldn't control. If someone was injured and I showed up in that ambulance, all I could control was what I was doing in the moment. I couldn't control what was going to happen to that person or anything. And the same thing on the disc golf course. Once that disc releases out of your hand, if the wind takes it and it hits a tree and it rolls OB, there's nothing you can do about that. Like, does it suck? Yes, it sucks. But there's nothing that you can do to control it back in bounds. So you just have to walk up, say, I'm a professional or I'm an amateur and I'm ready to go. And, this isn't just for professionals, but I'm ready to go. And all I can do now is throw my next shot. I can't throw two discs at the same time. The one that hit the tree and rolled OB and the one I'm about to throw, right? Or I'm going for the winning putt or the winning drive, or I'm 2 strokes back and I could, if I birdie this, I could win, whatever. You can't control what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people lose things, is they're trying to think about already, like, oh man, if I do this and this, I might win. Or if this and this happens, you can only control the disc in your hand, right? And so that's the first thing. Another one is, event plus response equals outcome. E plus R equals O. There's an event. We get to choose how we respond to that event. And that equals the outcome. E plus R equals O. So that's kind of what the control the uncontrollables. If I that disc comes out of my hand, it hits a tree, wind blows it, whatever, I have to choose the response in the moment. If I walk up and I'm frustrated and all that, their chances of success are lower. Could success happen with me all fired up because of what happened? Yeah, sure. Like, there is a chance, but there's a better chance of having a more positive outcome. I can't guarantee the outcome, but there's a better chance of that outcome if I walk up and my response is, I'm throwing what I'm throwing, right? Mm-hmm. And when we think about like people will say, Seth, but I'm like, why can't I get fired up? Fire can cook your food or it can burn your house down, right? I've seen players where, right? I've seen players where it's like, I've seen players on tour where fire cooks their food. They get like two bogeys in a row and they get fired up. You're like, oh gosh, they're about to birdie the next 8. Like, you're just, because it's not that they're not kicking their bag. They're channeling it to like, okay, I'm locking in. Like, I'm fired up with what's happening, so I'm locking in, and I'm, going to focus on what, keep my focus forward and all that. Or there's people that they burn their house down. They're frustrated, they're kicking their bag, they're throwing whatever.
Jenny's looking at me. I'm guilty of this.
All right. And you know what I tell people that they're like, I just can't get over it. And so I say, don't get over it. Just give yourself permission to not getting over it after the last putt. Like, give yourself permission there. Say, I'm going to be so upset about this. Like, I am so mad that the wind did this, or I'm so mad that the OB line did that. And after this round is over, I'm going to do something very math wise, right? I'm going to kick something, or I'm going to, punch my fist into my other hand or whatever. I'm going to give myself permission to release all that afterwards. And then it's not like you have to just let it go. If you're like, that's just not me. It's not me. It's not who I am. I get fired up. Okay, get fired. Like, cook your food now, burn your house down after.
Is that kind of like I'll forgive myself, but I'm not going to forget?
Yeah, there you go. Like, right. That's fine. Right. And so, like, you have to. And if you look at other sports, like, they have to, like, you can have baseball pitchers or baseball players, and they're, it's the World Series and they're one strike away from winning, and you look at them and they're not high-fiving each other yet. They're like, we have to wait. Like, we're just here. Like, you got to wait until it's all over, and then, burn your house down, or get all ecstatic and jump around and high five people. You know, like try to channel the energy that you need for what you need, and then afterwards, you know, let it all out later.
Well, I think that's one of the attractive points of disc golf or golf type sports is that it is kind of this perfect mesh of both the mental and the physical.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
I was gonna say one of the selling points for Chief Kitsap getting the disc golf course was I was explaining that, you know, we have some kids with behavioral issues. And so what I can do is I can take one of those kids out there and be like, hey, you want to go throw a couple holes? And it's usually by the time we just finish the first one that they're starting to regulate and things like that, or just going for a walk through the course. And so it really does. Part of it, I think, is the healing energies of being outside in nature too. So I think that contributes to our mental health out there on the course too.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really appreciate that you call them mental skills, because that really shifts kind of my thinking into, you know, this is a skill just like throwing the disc or putting that you have to develop. You have to practice it. And you're absolutely right. When you're out there in it, it's, if you don't rehearse these things in your mind, you cannot draw up those inspirations and those feelings when you're, you know, in it sometimes, especially if you're having a tough round. I remember when I was playing hockey, I used to visualize, you know, the different saves and different things that I'd make all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You know, the more that you can do that and tap into that before, the better you're going to be able to access it, you know, when you need it. In all levels, like going back to like the Coast Guard or the ambulance, like we would practice things ahead of time. We would drill things. We would go through things so that we could stay focused and stay in the moment and you know, be comfortable being uncomfortable, you know, when we needed to. If we didn't do that, we would be in a much worse position when, you know, when those tones go off and we got to show up and make things happen. But it's, so if mentally we're not preparing ourselves for the level of stress that we're going to get on the course, you know, it can really set us back in certain ways. And really one challenge that we have about disc golf is that there's not really any adversity in disc golf until you tee off on one, you know, for a tournament round. Like, there's not much adversity, right? Like in high school, I was going to say baseball. Let's go hockey, right? You played hockey. So random Tuesday night practice. If you're just out there, just, you know, kicking around, not putting any effort in, you know, not really making sure that you want to make the plays, what happens? Like, is the coach like, oh, Brandon, like, great job today, just kind of, you know, skating around and, you know, making snow angels, you know, or ice angels? Like, what was going to happen to you?
I'm probably going to get a puck fired at my head.
You are,
yeah,
right?
Wake up.
Coach is going to be like, Brandon, on the bench, this guy wants it more, right? Like, so there's adversity. You've got to show up and you've got to perform on a random Tuesday night practice, right? Where in disc golf, we don't have any of that adversity. You know, now people can have stress that, oh gosh, there's a tournament coming up, but actual tournament play, we don't. I had an athlete one time on tour and a couple years ago, and he's like, Seth, you know, like, I'm so frustrated because I have really good practice rounds and I feel so on during practice. I feel so good and loose during practice, but I just can't translate it into my tournament rounds. What do you think's the problem? And I told him, I said, you know, I've watched you practice, and the thing I'll say is this. Your practice rounds are usually you and 6 other dudes out there laughing, making jokes, having fun, talking about what's going on, about floating down the river on Monday. You know, you're throwing 5 discs on for every tee pad, even though 3 of those are discs you never would even think to throw on that hole. You're just, putting reps in for reps' sake. You're not paying attention. You're not being intentional. You're not staying focused. And then it's all carefree, on Thursday and Friday when, the money and the contracts and, everything's on the line. Now it's like, oh gosh, this is a different game from yesterday. Yesterday was throwing discs with friends. Today is throwing discs for my livelihood. And so that's a total different stress altogether. And so now you can't just 100% replicate that, but there are ways to replicate that. But really the first thing is being very intentional about your practice rounds, being very intentional about your skill. Like you look at Ricky, I used to tell people now I can list a whole lot more names, but back in like 2016, if I don't say any names doesn't mean that they're not great golfers or anything, but I would tell people, everyone wants to do what Paul, Ricky, and Eagle do, but very few people want to do what Paul, Ricky, and Eagle do.
That's a very,
like I said, now
very
I can
well
add
said.
more names.
Very
Right?
well
Yeah,
said.
they want to hold the trophy over their head, but they don't want to show up on Thursday and Wednesday and Thursday and play practice rounds by themselves or with one other person, take notes in a notebook, work on meditation and breath work and make sure they're getting enough sleep. And, so there's a lot of adversity on the course for everyone. And even as AMs, we want to perform well, but we don't have that adversity during our practice rounds and that we do during the tournament rounds. And we wonder why, we get frustrated and why everything felt great yesterday and not great today.
You ever tried golfing with 5 kids?
Yeah.
That's adversity.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, we that's partially why we named our podcast The Intentional Disc Golfer, is we were trying to come up with, what do we need to do to really take this game to the next level. And I think that you said it very well, talking about going out and doing what Eagle and Ricky and Paul do on a regular basis. And so we're kind of going through those steps, making those changes ourselves and sharing that with our listeners too.
I love it.
So before we get too far detached, I know it's like half hour later, but I've been wanting to say thank you for your service, sir. It's guys like you out there doing what you do that make it possible for us to do what we do. And that is not going unnoticed, at least not here. And to all of our service members and veterans out there, thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. It was an honor, pleasure, 4 amazing years of my life that, I always look back fondly on. And that, it has been over 20 years. I would have been retired by now from the military if I would have stayed in. But the people that I worked with, they, some of my closest friends, brothers and sisters for life. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. So you kind of got into talking about having getting the mental game all set up for success. You talked a little bit about getting your environmental conditions set up for success. So setting up your environment, how do I go about doing that? Where do I start? Can you point us in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. Setting your environment up for success is so critical if you want to achieve most things that we want to achieve in life. We got to have, an environment that allows us to thrive, the conditions that allow us to keep moving forward. And setting your environment up for success is it's one of the first things I talk about with people that want to make any sort of change. Usually positive. I don't really have anyone wanting to do a negative change, but a positive change in their life.
Like you need to come down a peg or two here. Like, come on.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. You get realistic. No, the thing is this. I'll say this. There's gonna be so much to say. First thing I'll say is I love ice cream. I have great fond memories of my grandmother. She would always make us chocolate shakes, and we, lie on the couch, my head on on her lap, running her fingers through my hair as I'm drinking a chocolate shake. My uncle would always say ice cream is the cure for everything. I love ice cream. If I have a pint of ice cream, if I have a gallon of ice cream in the house, I'm going to eat it every night. If I don't, there's a much greater chance that I don't eat it every night. I'm setting myself up for success.
All right, what's your go-to?
I'm setting my environment up. Oh God, I love chocolate chip cookie dough. But the thing is, there's a lot more places now that you're like, no, this is vanilla with like 3 or 4 pieces of cookie dough in there. So, my oldest daughter, that was her go-to, but she found the same thing that, there's only a few places that really actually have the cookie dough in there. But chocolate peanut butter, mint chip, I mean, there's so many. I think I'm going to reward myself with ice cream after this podcast.
Hey, there you go.
There you go.
No, but you got to set your environment up for success. You got to, most of the time, the things that keep us from our goals is not that we don't want to reach our goals, that we don't think that we're going to find value out of attaining them or moving closer to them. It's that there's a little roadblock in between, where we are at and where we want to be. And so removing that roadblock and realizing that it's not a roadblock, it's probably just a speed bump, and that we can get over speed bumps. And setting your environment for success is just a speed bump. If I am working with someone and they're like, I'm just having a really hard time doing any sort of physical movement, and I talk to them and they're like, I've got no space to train in my house. I'm like, well, how about you, just clear out a little area and you designate, like, that's where I do my planks and my, dead bugs and my side planks and stuff. Right? Like, I'm going to keep a resistance band by my bed. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to do some shoulder exercises real quick before I brush my teeth or after brush my teeth. Like, there's all different ways that you can think about setting your environment up for success, both physically, nutritionally. Like, if I want to read a book on, let's say mental skills, mental performance, mental health, whatever, having it by my bed is going to be much easier for me to do than if that book is out in my garage. And so I need to think about how can I, and everyone else that's listening, is think about what are little things that you can do to set your environment up, because you're going to find it much more easily accessible and attainable if you do that.
So in a nutshell, it's make success easier and more accessible, and make the failures or the obstacles more difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. Remove as much static and interference between you and what you want to do. Remove as much as you can, and you're going to find it easier, an easier path. Not an easy path, but an easier path.
Well, somebody really wise once said to me that there's a difference between easy and simple. Setting up your environment might be, simple to do, and you put the resistance band next to the bed, or like Jenny keeps a little peddler thing underneath her desk at school so she can stand there and work out at school. Mm-hmm. But doing that is not necessarily always easy.
Yeah, I can tell you that I have not used the pedal thing at my desk at all this year. However, we do have a large campus, so I'm always out walking and making sure that I get my steps in. But yeah, it's there, but I haven't used it.
Yeah, well, there you go. You're getting the walking in. That's good. But so how do we, when we have something and we're just not using it, go, what is my relationship with how I think about I'm supposed to use that, right? So one thing we talk about here at Disc Golf Strong is a concept of good, better, best. 1 minute is better than 0 minutes. It all adds up. Consistency is the magic pill you must swallow. So many phrases I can, start spurting out. But that's it. Like, a lot of people that I would work with say that were former, high-level athletes. They'd be like, oh man, Seth, I want to make improvements in my life, and I want to start working out. But I'm finding it really hard to train for an hour like I used to back in high school or college, and back to deadlifts and Olympic lifts, all the different cleans and jerks and this and that. And I'm like, can you put on your shoes and go for a 5-minute walk with your family or something? It's like, yeah, I can do that. I'm like, that's a great start. Hey, it counts. It adds up. Can I use the peddler for a minute? And, when a minute's easy, then it's like, oh, I've already been doing this for a minute. Like I told an athlete this the other day while talking about off-season training stuff. And I told him, I said, give yourself, if you commit to 5 minutes of this one thing we were talking about, 5 minutes. And if you get 5 minutes, check, done, right? But you might find that you get 5 minutes and you're like, man, I'm really enjoying this right now. And so you keep going. But if not, and 5 minutes is it, good, that's good. It's not, there's no bad, there's no wrong. It all adds up. And so just little bits at a time, bite-sized your way to success is, a great way to think about it. Because a lot of people say that want to get better for disc golf or for their, with their performance or their skills or anything. I'm like, hey, it's all good. Any progress is progress. And so if you can do a minute of something, that's good. Because when we talk about motivation, action precedes motivation, right? Like everyone's waiting to be motivated to do something. But if we think that we get motivation is built by seeing the results of action, even if it's a small action, and we go, that felt good to do that for just a few minutes. I think I'll do that again the next time, tomorrow. But if I don't, I have no judgment. I tell my athletes, like, there's no judgment. If they come in and like, Seth, I haven't worked out for like a week. I'm like, hey, that's okay. You probably had other pressing things. Let's get back to it this week. How can we help do that? And so if we start judging ourselves and like, man, I wanted to do it for a minute each day and I just didn't, that can be a roadblock versus if we think about just things as speed bumps, like I said earlier, speed bumps we can get over. Yeah.
I'm glad you touched on the motivation, because that's actually what I was going to ask you next. I did want to make a anecdote, though, is that I was listening to Joe Rogan talking to an MMA fighter, and he said the secret to training is not going in and killing yourself 3 days a week and doing the 3 sets of 10 and that thing. The trick to training is do a little bit every day. And then by the end of the week, that person that's not sore and not killing themselves every day is going to have more volume and more training reps or whatever it is than the person that's just doing the heavy lifting 3 times a day.
Absolutely. A friend, a mentor of mine, he's a world-class strength and conditioning coach. He's been doing it for like 40 years now. And he's worked with high-level Olympians and NFL and all these other sports, but he's worked with a lot in the special operations field. And so he jokes about it all the time, how, he's like, everyone thinks about Navy SEALs and Delta Force training and this and that. He goes, so, you got people that think that they need to train like a Navy SEAL just to go out and get the mail, without pain. And it's like, no, one, you don't need to train like that. And two, like, he trains special forces, like he trains operators. If they trained the way that people think that they train, now there's some people that just go hard, yes, but in general, they're moving away from that. They train hard, but they train smart. And there's times when you can train, like, if if you get the call that you got to be out in 24 hours, you got to be in another country, and you're like, yeah, but I just did legs yesterday, and my knees are so sore. I don't think I'm gonna be able to get out of a helicopter. It's like, no, you got to be prepared to go. Like, and I had the great honor of working with. I went and I got my years ago wilderness first responder certification. So
That's awesome.
it was I loved it, and it's totally different from my time on the ambulance. And ambulance is like, are you going to the hospital? Yes, load, go. Wilderness first responder is like, okay, well, we're like 3 days hike out of here, or they won't be out here for another like 8 hours. Should we call in a helicopter, or you just kind of having some stress? So, but it was great, and I got partnered up with this gentleman who found out he was a Navy SEAL, and I thought, that's great. Like we connected just from military stuff, and he didn't really say what he did in the Navy SEALs, but that he was doing some executive program coaching and stuff and outdoor retreats. So I looked up his name just to kind of learn more about him.
Can I take a guess at this?
Okay.
David Goggins.
Yeah. No, definitely not David Goggins. It was actually like the opposite of David Goggins. And because this Navy SEAL turned out to be, he was the former commander of SEAL Team 6.
Oh, wow.
And, yes. And he also developed and ran the presidential protection program for the president of Iraq back when they first, when everything kind of changed in Iraq. And so I talked to him. I was talking to him about just different concepts, and we started talking about breathing and stuff. And he's like, "Oh, that's like one of the most important things I do as a SEAL. Like I breathe, focus on, staying relaxed and breathing and this and that, because when he's out there under pressure, it's not that he just did PR on his hang clean that's going to make him the best performer. It's going to be that he could stay under control, that he was strong enough, and then he could tap into using that strength the way he needed to use that strength. And so breath work and stuff, everyone thinks that you got to train crazy. When I first went to train with the Anaheim Ducks, I thought, man, these are elite athletes. I'm going to see the craziest stuff. I'm going to see all this complexity and everything. And I walk in first, it was like, my coach didn't even introduce me to everyone. He's just like, all right, team's about to come in, workouts on the board, coach them. I'm like Tamu Solani, Ryan Getzlaff, like all Corey Perry, like everyone just walks in. I'm like, hello everyone, I'm Coach Seth, like here I am. And so that was very stressful for me, but that's probably what he wanted. But what was on the board was like glute bridges, side planks, half kneeling kettlebell press, not PR, just half kneeling kettlebell press, some Turkish get ups, things like that. And I was like, what? Like, why are we not doing the stuff that I see on Instagram? And he said, to me, when we were just talking about training and stuff, we talk about risk versus reward. The show's not in the weight room, the show's on the ice, right? And so he had to be very, he had to filter everything down and to what was going to make the most sense and what was going to be the most intentional for those athletes and help them be the best athlete they can be, not be like the coolest looking athlete on Instagram. And so that you'll see that in a lot of my programming and stuff. I'm working with these players that are going for whatever contract size they're, that might be, pushed across the table to them. And if I'm sitting there and I'm doing some crazy complex exercise that, they should have no business doing, that they didn't earn through prior training, then I blow out their knee and, doing a crazy single leg box jump onto a Bocce ball or something. Like, that's just not beneficial. Like, and so I kind of don't know how I got off on this tangent down this road, but we're here. And so, like it's how you train should be very intentional, and it should be, risk versus reward, and do the foundational stuff. So, yes, where should we go from here?
Well, and I like what you said, and I heard it on another interview that you did earlier when we were doing our show research, is that you have to earn the right to have certain exercises in your repertoire. So maybe let's start from the top. Let's talk about, like, how do you, these elite athletes and even like the amateur athletes, how do you warm up for something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, let's touch on this earn concept. So the thing is, my players, or any athlete that I'm working with, whether they're pro, amateur, or I just want to be active in my life and play with my kids, like they have to, and this is a good thing, they have to earn complexity, they have to earn intensity, they have to earn load, they have to earn variety, they have to earn all that. And it's not like the military type earn. It's just like, my child should learn how to walk before I just lift them up and say, now run. I don't just hold on to them, put them up their feet and be like, run. No, they've got to go through all the steps to get to running. And the same thing is with training or whatever we're doing, we're trying to be successful at. If we earn it, we're going to find so much more success and so much less chance of injury risk and results that we didn't want, non-productive results. So I do that with all my athletes and everyone. So, there's a skill age. Like, a lot of people will look at professional athletes and like, say, professional disc golfers, and they'll say, that person should train like an alpha. Someone said that one time to a video that I had showing, I think it was Ricky doing some sort of exercise. And like, there's a skill age, and then there's like a training / experience age, right? And so if you are performing really well on the course, but you've never done a deadlift or a hip hinge movement or a squat, or you don't do any core stuff, you shouldn't just be going to the most advanced things. We should all start out with the foundational stuff. When it comes to training for disc golf or for any sport, but let's talk about disc golf. Let's stay focused on disc golf. There's a lot of ways that people want to improve on by just their skill and skill development. And skill development is important. We should work on skill and technique acquisition, but that's like the top of the pyramid, and that's where we should eventually reach. But a lot of us, we don't focus on the fundamentals and the foundational base first. And so what we're doing is, as we're trying to get better as disc golf athletes, we are trying to apply technique solutions to what many times are movement problems. And so an easy example here is somebody's trying to do some technique skill practice where they've watched online someone that is, trying to show them how to get more reach in their backhand. So they're doing all these drills and they're just not getting the success they want. Well, maybe their upper back just doesn't have the adequate mobility to be able to rotate through the thoracic spine, the upper back. And so we're trying to apply a skill solution, technique solution, to something that is very much a movement problem. So we get you more upper back mobility, and now you can get more reach back in your technique. So to your question about warming up, that was your question, right? Warming up.
Yeah. Talk about kind of how to warm up effectively. How long should I warm up? What should kind of how do I know when I'm warmed up? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. So if we look at warm up, so I guess I went down that whole path to now with the warm-ups are focused on the warm-ups that I do on tour, the warm-ups I show. The first thing I put out with Disc Golf Strong was a warm-up, a pre-round warm-up, because, I'm glad you're touching on it, because it's so foundational. Every other athlete in other sports, they warm up. And so if we want to have something we can do right away that can impact our performance on the course, lower our injury risk, get us prepared to optimize our potential, is warming up.
And
now,
I think that also
ahead,
helps
Jen.
us to think about that we're an athlete too. Because I know when I would just go out and play, it wasn't the same as now that I've started warming up. Like, it gets me into that athletic mindset too.
That mental shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point.
Yes, absolutely. And in warm-ups, we're always like, when I remember, like, there was a tournament, a home course tournament back in, like, this was 2016, I think, when this happened. And, I was talking to my friend that was running the tournament. I was like, hey, what about I just show a warm-up? And so I've been putting stuff out online, and I was already kind of working with Madison Walker and Sarah Hokum and stuff. And so I was like, how about I just do a little pre-round warm-up for people if they want? And he's like, yeah, that's a great idea. So we're all kind of hanging out, and I yell out, there's a lot of people there. I'm like, hey, if anyone wants to do a pre-round warm-up, come on over here. And, it's just going to take a couple minutes. We can just go right through it. Not even like my best friends came over. Like, my wife was there, and she was like, I was like, everyone knows that, like, this is what I do. And everyone's like, I'm not doing that. Like,
you're getting that
crazy.
side
Not because of this.
You're getting the side eye from the
What's that?
wife, like, you're embarrassing me.
Yeah, she's like, like, whoa, what is going on here, right? Like, nobody wanted to be, like, it's just, warming up was not popular. It was just, it's not the culture of our sport, right? I taught a clinic with Eric and Tina Oakley back in, we were in Sweden. We taught in a couple different countries, but we were in Sweden when this story happened, and there was like 50 or 60 people there. And I was doing my portion of it. And so I said, how many of you play some sort of sport other than disc golf that you grew up playing, like, football or hockey or something? And everyone raised their hand. And I said, how many of you, before you practice or play that sport, warm up? And everyone raised their hand. I said, how many of you warm up for disc golf? And no one raised their hand. And everyone's laughing and stuff. I said, so if this all magically went from a disc golf clinic to an ice hockey or a soccer or football clinic, you guys would all, and I said, warm up, you'd all be like, touching fingers, like, okay, let's give each other space. Like, we got to do our warm-ups, right? And so, obviously they were there to hear what I had to say. So they were kind of vested in, but still it just wasn't cool. So it's great to see the first many years of Disc Golf Strong was just trying to get not only people thinking about themselves as athletes, but also like thinking about like changing the culture around warming up. And so we keep it simple. So with what I do on the tour, is I keep it simple, I keep it actionable, I keep it relevant to what we're doing, and I keep it routine. And so there's a lot of things when we think about warm-ups. We look at soccer warm-ups, or we look at baseball warm-ups. We look at, warm-ups are evolving to be something other than just like something to just get people moving, athletes moving, and B, like a time killer for the coach. When he wants to like, hey, yeah, we got warm-ups. Go run for 10 minutes and come back, and then we're going to do some high knees and some A-skips and stuff. It's like, it wasn't really thought out. It was kind of just like, okay, we got an hour, 2-hour session, let's try to just use up some of that time warming up.
Well, like junior high football, that would be when my football coach would stand on the sidelines and smoke a cigarette.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. That's what I'm saying. Like, it wasn't a well thought. So people go back like, man, I got to think about what I did in junior high. I'm like, it probably wasn't the warm up you should be doing. Like that wasn't a thought out warm up. That wasn't a thought out warm up. That was just time to make you sweat, to make it feel like you were, doing something hard. And like you said, for the coach to smoke a cigarette, or finish
that was
their
his
coffee.
warm up.
Right? Yeah, right. So
That was his meditation.
There you go. Exactly. So we want to keep it simple. Like I don't need. So if I on tour, like I've got an athlete showing up and they're about to tee off in like 30 minutes to an hour, the last thing I need to do is teach them some super complex movement that, is going to take them 15 to 20 minutes to learn. And they've got to really think hard about it and get the nuances of the technique. Like, that's not what warm-ups are for. Warm-ups before we throw, warm-ups before we play, keep it simple, right? Complexity for complexity's sake is not beneficial. It's just complexity. And so keep it simple. Are we moving? Are we getting blood flow? Are we warming things up, the tissues? Are we kind of, stimulating the nervous system to get everything firing? Yes, like there's more to a warm up, benefits of a warm up than that, but we'll, the people can Google those lists, there's lots of stuff to warming up, lots of benefits. So keeping it simple, that's one. Keeping it foundational. What are the things that we need as disc golf athletes? We need upper back mobility. We need to be able to rotate through our thoracic spine. We need to be able to rotate through our hips. We need to be able to express some power from our lower body. We need to have good range of motion in our shoulders, kind of just get the shoulder joints moving. So if you look at the warm up I do, and it's the same warm up that I have on a website, like it's attacking, or it's attacking is not the right word. It's working the foundational patterns that we need. We need mobility, we need dynamic mobility, and we need stability for our joints. And then all the other good stuff happens, the warming up the tissues and the blood flow and all that stuff. And then routine. I don't want my athletes to show up and they're like, gosh, I can't go over and see Seth because he's going to teach me like 15 new things every single tournament. Like they don't got time for that. Like,
all that
like
complex
earlier,
stuff. All the complex stuff does wonders for your ego, but maybe not practical for your physicality.
Exactly, right? Like the show, like I said earlier, the show is not in the gym. The show's not over at the performance zone on tour. The show is on the course, right?
Yep.
And so I want them to be able to walk over and they can do the same thing. And when I'm not there, if I'm off and I've been called away to do something else, or, they're out doing their field work, they can do the same thing that they did before. Because the brain, when it comes to lifting, yeah, you have to, kind of go with some different principles of periodization. But when it comes to just warming up, you do an upper back rotation, you do some hip circles, some leg swings and stuff. Your body's not like, well, you've done that before. Like, I'm not going to make that effective for you. Like, that's not the goal. We don't need linear periodization, for just progressively up for a warm up. So I want a routine. I want the players to just be able to just mindlessly go through it, get all the good stuff that happens with it, and then go do what they're getting paid to do, And so same thing with the amateurs. Like, we want to just say, we've been putting out the same thing. We don't really change it. And people are like, man, it's the same warm up. I'm like, does it need to change? Like, is there like, the brain's not like, man, I've been waiting for a new warm up forever for this thing. So, I'm going to make you be a less, optimized athlete because you did the same halos, you did the same hip circles as you did, the last 3 weeks. So the, when we think about it like that, the warm up then just doesn't seem as, it's not a non-starter for us, because we're not like, man, I need to think of new things all the time, or I need to, impress my friends with what I'm about to do, with this disc or this, this band. So, so that's kind of, how I think about the warm up, is kind of those principles, and it doesn't need to be long. And one thing I'll see is I'll have like players, I've had players come over that they played soccer or they played ultimate or something, and they're like, they see my warm up and they do it. And they're like, yeah, that was good. But like, where's the high knees and the A skips and the, ladder drills and stuff. And I'm like, do you really want your, be counting your heartbeat in your head before you go do a few more practice putts and head over to hole one? Like we don't need that. This is not a soccer match, like, so I've had players that have tried it. They're like, yeah, I'm going to do my warm up as well that I used to do back in soccer. And then they do it. And then they're like, man, that was just way too intense for what I needed to do for disc golf. I was breathing, 20 repetitions a minute, and that's way too high for what you should be doing when you're about to tee off in hole one or putt at the basket, And so we don't need to keep it super intense. We don't need to jump around and stuff. That's just not our sport.
And that's something I've noticed with myself just in playing in general. Like there's one course we play is NAD in Bremerton, and there's this hill between hole 8 and 9 that I always know, like I can tell by my heart rate that I need to just take a few breaths and let it come down before I even throw. Because if my heart rate's too high, I tend to, overthrow or throw the wrong way. And so I've learned that about myself too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I don't want any player to sit there and be like, hey, why'd you miss that putt on hole one? It's like, what were you thinking about? It's like, well, I was counting my respiratory rate and my heartbeats in my head. I could hear them pounding in my head because you had me do jumping jacks and high knees and A skips before you had me tee off.
It was funny. We were at Ladies of the Lake with Jenny here, and she was on fire with her putting game this one day. And one of our friends came over who was kind of struggling with her putting, and she's like, so how do you have her working on her putting? Like, she's gotten really good all of a sudden. And I looked over and I said, well, every time she misses a putt, I make her get down and do push-ups.
Just so not true.
Definitely not true. But
there you go.
Yeah, right.
So, earlier you made mention of having technique solutions to movement problems. And the thing that bounced into my head instantly was talking about compensated muscle movements and the push and pull of your musculature on your skeletal system. And just, I have a little bit of a background in personal training, so I know a little bit about this stuff. I'm by no means an expert, but I did actually go through with passing the ACE test. So, yeah, so I know a little bit about it, but you're well and above like my knowledge.
Yeah. So talking about movement compensation, the body is going to always choose the path of least resistance in most cases. And it's going to allow us to keep doing what we need to do to function as humans. Because we're great compensators. If I, am walking through the woods and I sprain my ankle and I'm like, and I can barely walk on it. Like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna make it back to camp. All of a sudden a bear pops out of the woods. My brain's like, do you even have an ankle? I'm running, right? Unless it's fractured, right? So it's going to compensate. It's going to do everything it needs to do to keep me survival mode, right? So our body will compensate, and all of us have compensations. We do less human stuff than we used to. Our ancestors would never imagine moving as little and having as little variety in movements and solving movement puzzles with our patterns than we do now. So we have movement dysfunction and movement compensations. We accomplish the same goal, just not the way that's probably optimal. And so it puts more stress in places that probably aren't designed to handle those kind of stresses. And so a lot of movement compensation results in chronic overusage in certain things. Like I said, stress points are getting stressed that shouldn't be stress points because of the compensations. And then we get injuries, and usually they're chronic injuries that are below the level of our, awareness at the time, conscious awareness. And then they become acute because, for some reason our brain decided to tap into what was going on in that joint or that tendon or whatever, or we did something in the moment that all of a sudden it was like, nope, okay, you're done. Like I chronically compensated long enough. Now you are officially injured, or you at least know you're injured, right? So we want to try to correct these movement compensations as much as we can. And so the first step is knowing that the body compensates. And so I'm glad you brought it up and we're talking about it, right? If I have, a lot of people just want to work on an engine. They want to build an engine, be a better performer by building an engine. So they, if I'm sitting there and I'm working with an athlete and we're like, all right, we're going to do this drill on the ground that's going to, work on a little hip stability, get the stabilizer muscles around the hip firing. Now they've worked with me long enough, or they hear me, my little education kind of talks about certain topics like this with them, that they're not going to brush it off. But a lot of people say the look online and they'll be like, where's the heavy deadlifts? Why are you doing this half kneeling drill for hip stability? Well, if you have a race car and you go to get in your race car, and I say, Brandon or Jenny, I want you to get in this race car and I want you to drive around the track as fast as you can. And the engine's great. It's got a high horsepower engine. You're going to just crush it. You're going to go so fast you can't even believe it. And you're like, okay, you're like, let's do this. Let's go. And then right before you take off, I'm like, oh, just so you know, I think the steering linkage might be a little loose. The front left tire is definitely down a few PSI. And I think the brakes haven't been checked in a while. Go. Right? You're going to be like,
Jenny's had that car.
Yeah, I've had that car.
So, yeah, right? So you're like, I don't know about this anymore. So not only are you going to not be able to optimize and maximize your performance, right? Because now you're thinking about all these little things that might be wrong. And the engine's fine, right? But it's these little things. It's these little things that impact performance. Now, if you're driving and the front left tire is a little more deflated, and there's other small little things that have happened on the car, not only are you not going to feel as confident, so our brain does the same thing. It doesn't feel as confident because it detects those movement imbalances, lack of stability in joint or mobility issues or something. But also, you're going to find more wear and tear in certain areas. And so while we can build the engine, we got to really make sure that all the other small stuff, we got to make sure the tires are good to go. We got to make sure the brakes are good to go. We got to make sure the bearings are good. Like those things, because those are the things that are really going to put us out of the race, is those little movement compensations. And so that's really what I've always been focused on in disc golf, is helping people fix those things. It's like, okay, let's work on the people are like, I want to throw farther. Okay, let's check your upper back mobility, your hip stability, your ankle mobility, things like that. Yeah, but I want to throw farther. Okay, I got it. Cool. Let's check your upper back mobility. Let's check your hip mobility. Let's check hip stability. Because if we are compensating through those areas, we're not going to be able to tap into the performance that we have. Like, we have amazing amounts of strength and power and untapped potential, right? We've all heard the stories about the, little old lady that goes and picks the car up off her, grandkid. And like, those things have happened, they're tapping into things they never knew they had. So we all have untapped potential. But if the brain senses these movement compensations and all these other energy leaks, stuff like that, it's not going to allow us to tap into the power and performance potential already inside of us.
No, that's really interesting with the compensated muscle movements and stuff. I see a lot of the people that we play with on a regular basis, and we're kind of getting up into the older divisions, and they are limping or got their bent over, the percussion guns or whatnot out, and complaining about this injury or that injury, and it's like, well, have you seen your form? Have you watched how you move and how you throw? And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but it's like, when you have this baseline knowledge of kinesiology, you kind of understand why things are happening the way they're happening and why they're having the ailments they're having.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, the answer to a lot of these, and I don't know if I can really say that it's the answer, but a path to a potential solution, let's go with that, for a lot of these is doing stuff like getting working on those compensations. So someone will send me a video and they'll, be like, hey, what do you think of my technique on this? Like, I'm trying to get more distance, and, what do you see? What drill should I do? And I'm like, well, I see that your plant leg hip looks a little unstable. And like, yeah, but like, how do I get more distance? Like, let's work on your plant leg hip, because that's an energy leak right there. Like the brain's thinking like, whoa, I don't feel that hip. I don't feel the stability and control in that hip joint that I need. And so you're not going to be able to access that power and potential, but it's probably going to change your technique. So, working on tying up the 4 knots, the 2 shoulders and hips, and then, getting the core engaged and stuff can go a long way for that. But that's that thing with the technique is a challenge that we have. There's a couple of challenges that we have in disc golf. One is, I've been saying this since probably day one. That's the best thing about disc golf is we can play every day. And the worst thing about disc golf is we can play every day. Right. And, because, like how many other sports can they just go and for free play it and just put it at high volume, high stress, high loading, high everything on our bodies, right? And we can go, well, a 45-year-old amateur is not going to throw as hard as Simon Lizotte. Like, but Simon Lizotte throwing at 100% power and an amateur throwing at 100% power, it's still 100% power on their frame, right? They're still putting all that they have into it. He can just handle 100% power, even though he doesn't throw 100% power. He can handle that more than somebody that doesn't have the kind of the capacity and the framework and everything that Simon or Eagle or anyone else does. And so finding our ways. Go ahead, Jenny.
I was just going to say that that's something. So since we started actually focusing on doing exercises specifically for improving our disc golf game, that's something that I've had happen is I've found I don't have to try as hard to throw further than I did before. So being able to have that strength, it makes a huge difference, and you don't have to try as hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can, not only do you have to not try as hard, but not trying as hard, and just internally the things that we don't even think about, like you've created a buffer zone between you and injury, and and moved yourself closer to optimizing that performance. So the body just is putting less stress, even though it's still a lot of stress on things, on joints and tendons and all that. It's putting less stress so you can handle more, and the body's going to reward you, And one other thing that is a challenge about our sport is we can get relatively good, underline, bold, relatively good, pretty quickly, and then do it high volume, high intensity, high loads, all that, right? And about our sport, like when I look at like coaching on the technique side, the skills and stuff, one of the things I see as challenging is, we're using models of technique and attainment performance results that really you don't see a lot in other sports for amateurs, right? So like if I picked up a baseball and started throwing with my kids and they're like, Dad, you're good at throwing a baseball, I'm not jumping on the internet and being like, how to throw 100 miles an hour like a major league closer, right? Like that's just not going to happen. Like their technique, everything, their results are different than what I can or should even attempt to attain in the moment where I'm at, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the stuff that we see is based off of like, let's look at Eagle McMahon and let's look at what his form is. And then I just started disc golf 6 months ago. And so I'm going to work really hard to look like Eagle McMahon. when I throw. Eagle McMahon's been doing it for a long time, and there's a lot of changes and lever arms and all sorts of stuff that's happened for him to get to where he's at. A lot of reps, a lot of, that path, that journey, and we're trying to get to that point, like in an incredible speed. So we're at point A. I'm at point A. Eagle's at point Z. I'm just scouring the internet to try to how to get to point Z, before my next tournament in 6 weeks, where I should be working on getting to point B and then point C. And then, you just kind of arrive at point Z at some point if you do.
Yeah. And one great thing about disc golf is that there's so much open source training out there and information on YouTube and the internet and articles and all sorts of things. I would say almost more so than any other sport. But it's kind of like you said, it's the double-edged sword. There's so much information out there about disc golf, and it seems like everybody and their brother are, have the, add 30 feet to your shot, thing, or how to putt or whatever. And, there's a lot of, not necessarily, I wouldn't call it like misinformation out there, because I don't think they're doing it intentionally, but people that are just putting out information say, hey, try this, see if it works.
Yeah. And like you said, it's not, it's good intentioned information. And so, but again, I go to that point of like, in baseball or in hockey or in any other sport, when you're working with your coach in high school or junior high or anything, they're not like in the back of their head, they're, based off their experience of when they played in the NHL or they played in college or whatever, but they're working with you on who you are now, your body, your limitations, your skill level, the way you think about, being on the ice and all that. And they're not trying to model you against the top model, and that is a challenge in our sport, is like on the skill level is we're looking at what the best players in the world are doing. And then we're trying to go out there and add 30 feet by doing that. And I was talking with Brian Earhart about this recently, where we were just talking about, Brian's a great coach and, amazing in history of the game, and he's a great orator about the game and philosopher about the game and all that. We were just talking about just like the youth and what is going to be the explosion of the youth for our sport. And I said, one of my things that I see as a challenge for our sport that I want to make sure doesn't happen is that like a little league baseball coach is not working with a 12-year-old on trying to get that 12-year-old the mechanics of a major league closer or a major league starter, right? Starting pitcher. They're trying to work with them on where they are at in the developmental sequence of life for a 12-year-old body and what they can do and not do and stuff. But, we're trying to push limits that, that we need to kind of make sure that we're doing it, in a safe and sound way. And to hit on one thing you said about gain 30 yards or gain 30 feet, right? I had an athlete one time, and he, younger athlete, he plays on the tour, and this a couple years ago, and he sent me a video of his form, and he's like, what I want to earn. He's like, I want to hit 500 feet. Like, what do I have to do right now to hit 500 feet? I said, well, there's a couple things. One, you can just play around with the, different disc weights and stabilities and stuff, and that and angles to try to hit 500 feet. I'm like, but do you really want to hit 500 feet or do you want to earn 500 feet? Because hitting 500 feet is like something you could potentially do every now and then if the wind is right and the stability is, in your favor and stuff. But if you earn 500 feet through training, through all the other stuff, you're going to have that 500 feet whenever you want it, versus like just something that you hope happens when the stars align at the tournament. And so,
it's kind of the difference between owning something and borrowing something. If you
yes.
you get the wind right and whatever. Well, you're borrowing that 500-foot shot. But like you said, if you go out there and you put in the work, you put in the time, put in the reps to really dial that in, you own that, and you don't ever have to give it away if you don't want to.
Exactly. So, we want to earn that distance, and sometimes just a quick trick over a YouTube video. And like I said, it's not, like you said, it's all good intentioned. And so it's not putting anyone down. It's just, where we're at in the sport, it's like everyone's looking for the quick fix, the quick thing to this, the quick thing to that. And so if we think about earning it more and gaining the experience along the way, like you said, we're going to own it and not borrow it for sure.
Yeah, it's like you said earlier in the podcast, it's like everybody wants to be the next Paul Macbeth, but then everybody wants to be the next Paul Macbeth.
Yeah. Yeah, like they want to do what Paul does, hold trophies up in the air, but, not, put the intentional practice and the focus and the, training his body and the mental work and everything he's done. I just want the trophy, and understandably, like that's what people want in sports. They want to see that shining moment at the end, but there's a path to get there, and you choose your path, and one path is owning it and, having success for a long time, or, for a certain number of years before, you move on to something else or injury takes you out or something. But, there's others that have sometimes a shorter path, and it may be a shorter path to success, but it may be also a shorter path to injury.
Yeah. We've said it before on the podcast. There's a great quote out there by, I believe it was Michelangelo when he was doing the Sistine Chapel. And he said, if you knew what it took to become a master, you would hardly think it was wonderful at all.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
So true. I can definitely agree with that quote.
So earlier you talked about the compensated muscle movements, and you're talking about power leaks and differences in form. And I have a working theory that I'm kind of developing that I wouldn't mind bouncing off you, is when we talk about our arm speed and the X step and how those two things affect each other. In watching the X step, I've kind of developed this theory that it's more about power conservation rather than power generation, because we have this gal that we play with all the time at tournaments. Her name is Danielle, and she's a very small individual. And I'm a big dude. I'm like 250 pounds, pretty muscular, and she can outdrive me. And I'm scratching my head like, well, what's going on? I know that, my fly weight is way higher than hers is. What's happening?
Yeah. You do have power conservation for sure. You have to have power generation. I know I saw a video recently where a skills coach said, like, you don't really need to worry about generating power. I think he was kind of saying, pushing off the back leg or anything. And I would say that, you look at baseball, you look at other sports, they would have something, different to say about that. Like, we need to be able to create power. We need to be able to have it go through what we call the kinetic chain from the lower body through from the lower body through a stiff and stable core up into the upper body and out into the disc, right? And so we need to generate power. We need to conserve power as well. We don't want the energy leaks. So I don't know what her background history is. Was she an athlete before in another sport?
Oh, she's FPO. She plays. She did the Cascade Challenge out here in Shelton when you guys were here.
Yeah. So besides disc golf, do you know if she did any other sort of other athletic?
I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I want to say I don't think she was, but who knows? Yeah, we only met her through disc golf, so we only know her as disc golf.
Gotcha. Yeah, so like, Emerson Keith, like he's a lot of power in a smaller package, and Emerson can create so much power, but he was a high level hockey player. He went through the developmental sequencing of being on the ice and stability and, and control and body awareness and all that. And so that, he can outdrive someone who is taller and bigger and, got more punch, but didn't have all that control and that movement capacity that was built up through other sports and other methods before. but also, I mean, there is, while we do look, say, by looking on tour, and we see that people with long lever arms and in tall frames are definitely throwing hard. They're not like out and driving, smaller frames by that much, and sometimes not at all. So one thing I would say is like my mentor that I referred to earlier, his name's Dan John. He had a joke where he's like, how do you say hello to a basketball, an NBA player? You look up and you reach up and shake their hand, say, how do you say hello to an Olympian weightlifter? You look down and shake their hand, like they're, like there's definitely something to say about smaller frames are able just to do lever arms and, they're just be able to create more compactness and to everything they're doing, that they can generate a lot of power, and they don't have to have it go through as long of a lever arm or the body to be able to transfer that force, right? You don't really see a lot of like 6'4", ice skaters that are doing the, all the pirouettes, whatever they do in ice skating,
you're talking about figure skating.
There you go. Thank you. Figure skating. That's what it's kind of, it wasn't coming to me. Right. Like, you do see some of them, you don't see a lot of them. And I'm just saying that because, when you're longer, it's a lot harder to create stability, for the joints to create stability. And there's a lot more chance for, energy dispersion before it gets to the disc.
Yeah. And
so while I agree with you that, there's definitely energy conservation, I think we definitely have to create power for sure. And that's something that we just, again, going back to, our years, like a baseball player, like you don't ever talk to anyone in the Major League Baseball and you're like, hey, when did you start playing baseball? And they're like, oh, really? Like freshman year of college, I kind of just fell into it. Like they've been training and doing power development and coaching and being able to learn how to transfer energy from their lower body into a baseball since they were little kids. And, we don't have as much of that yet in our sport. We will. And so I think that we'll see that in the future where, you got people coming up that have had a lot of that coaching and training and stuff that know how to generate power from the lower body. I just don't think we have as many people that have that experience yet to really know.
Okay, for my own curiosity here, kind of off topic, what is with tennis players? They come in they just can chuck it a mile, and it's something. I've run into a ton of tennis players that it's just like, oh, I started playing like a month ago, and I'm already playing MA1, and it's like, and you can throw 500 feet. What's going on here?
Yeah, well, that, I'm only going to assume that those tennis players did not start playing tennis like recreationally a year before they started playing disc golf, right? So I'm going to only assume that they probably, like a lot of really good tennis players, started in their youth. And so their brains were learning how to make that connection of plant, brace, transfer energy, release, right? And so so a disc golf, like putting a disc in their hand, like it's like learning like, oh, this isn't a racket, this is a disc, but meant to like behind, like underneath the skin, everything has been primed over many, many, many years of, here's what we want to accomplish. Here's the, run the motor program, flip the switch, push the button, boom, plant, brace the hip, generate, transfer that power through up into the disc, boom, everyone, high fives. Like that is like, that's why tennis and other rotational sports like that, you see people that have success that do that.
I have a lot of female friends that I've made that they used to play softball, and that seems to transition well to disc golf too.
Yep. Exactly.
All right. So, what kind of started this conversation of doing the nutrition and exercise for the last 2 episodes is, what we're doing to get ready for next season and our off season. So could you talk to a little bit about different habits and routines off season versus on season?
Yeah, for sure. So off season is the time definitely to start to work on the other sides of disc golf performance. And so with one side of disc golf performance is throwing for putt for birdies, the other side is all this off course stuff. And so it's a really good time to find ways to make improvements. And I say it that way, to find ways to make improvements, is because going back to what we were talking about earlier, is a lot of people don't start with off season anything because they think that they've got to do it all, right? And so like, well, gosh, off season training is me going and training an hour and a half or an hour 3 to 4 times a week. I don't even do it for 5 minutes right now, but now I've got to find time in my busy schedule with my kids or my work or whatever to go do some sort of off season training. Like, no, start with 5 minutes, start with 20 minutes, start with 10, whatever is realistically, doable for you. But do something. And so take that time to work on some mobility, work on some stability for your joints, things like that. So there's the physical side. Then there's the nutritional side. How am I going to, make a 10% improvement in my nutrition right now? I don't need to make 100% nutrition change if that's not going to be realistically doable for me, but how can I do 10%? And then when that becomes easy, I do 10% more. But that's where the off season is really good time to do that. In season definitely is more challenging because you're stacking up a bunch of reps. And so in season for my athletes is more about recovery and restoration and trying to, make sure you can get to the next one. That's the focus there. It's kind of taking what we did in the off season and now let's just manage and make it work and get you through the whole year. What kind of areas, say, for off season training do you have, should I explore in my topics, in my conversation?
You started to get into talking about the recovery and the active rest during the season. How important and how can we incorporate the recovery and the active rest?
Yeah, for sure. So, and starting to build some of the recovery, now during the off season makes it easier to kind of just flow into it during the season. So, a couple things with recovery is I have a lot of conversations with people and they're like, hey, I really want to, get more recovery and restoration for, I guess they don't use that word. I'll use it when I talk to them, but they'll be like, I want to recover better for my rounds and stuff. And they're like, should I do cryotherapy? Should I do red light therapy? Should I do IV treatments? Like, all these different things. And I'm like, well, let's start with, how much sleep do you think you average on a night? And, like, well, especially on tour, you got people like, oh, I'm on Instagram till, late at night. And so I'm not really getting a lot of sleep or I'm doing something, I'm out with people. I'm like, well, let's start there. Let's start with getting good quality sleep and try to keep it as regular as possible. So that's what I tell everyone at first. Like, if your body, we can go for all the kind of trendy things out there for recovery. But if we're not doing the foundational stuff, like making sure we're hydrated, making sure we're, trying to improve our sleep hygiene, making sure that, we're trying to get some, good nutrients in our body, kind of everything else is kind of, isn't going to probably have as good effects as possible. It's like my mentor, Dan used to say, he'd be like, someone walks in and he's, talks to his doctor and he's, smoking a cigarette and got a bottle of whiskey in his hand. He says, "Doctor, trying to improve my health, do you think I should put some chia seeds on my oatmeal?" And he's like, "Well, let's first maybe talk about getting the cigarette and the whiskey out of the hand, at the doctor's office. Like let's go for the big rocks first and make sure that we're doing that, and then all that other stuff can kind of explore later." So sleep, are you getting the sleep? Are you getting the nutrition? Are you getting the hydration? And then outside of that, foam roll, some soft tissue work, kind of just, it just feels good for the body to do some soft tissue work, roll around on a foam roll, roll around on a lacrosse ball, things like that, find some tender spots and kind of, do some little release or whatever we, want to call it now in the movement, kind of sphere on whatever it's doing to the muscle. It just feels good and people will loosen up some tension because of it. And then just a big thing is trying to think about your pitch count, your throw count. I've been talking to my players about this since the very beginning. I use baseball analogies so much. I'm using more hockey analogies now because I know you played some hockey. But I'm usually just like all baseball analogies. So this is the most hockey analogies I've pulled out of the out of the toolkit.
Well, we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Go wild, by the way.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I like that. So the pitch count, like the going back to that quote of the best thing about disc golf is you can play every day, and the worst thing about disc golf is you can play every day. We're throwing so much. We're throwing, putting so much volume on our body. And so the first thing I tell a lot of people when they want to improve their recovery, I'm like, let's talk about how many throws you're doing a week and how can we, lessen that a little bit. And now I know, like at an amateur level, people will be like, well, I don't do any field work. I'm just going out and throwing. I'm playing rounds with friends. And that's one of the most amazing things about this sport, but it's also a challenge about our sport because we're putting more volume than a pitcher would ever thinking about putting on in a month. We're putting that volume on in a week we're throwing and it doesn't matter if we're throwing a disc or we're throwing a baseball. We're putting volume on the elbow, the shoulder, the body. Right. And so cutting down some of those reps can be beneficial, and that will help kind of in that restoration and recovery period because we don't have to try to recover from such a deficit every time. I could talk a lot about a lot of those things. Anything you want me to kind of hit on more?
Well, I want to throw one out there for our friend Kayla. She asked us at a tournament once, before tournaments, I think everybody's dealt with this to some extent, that how do you deal with getting sufficient sleep the night before a tournament? Because, we are living in the age of anxiety and, trauma reinforcement and all sorts of mental health issues. And, going into a tournament is stressful, even at an amateur level. So what are some tricks and tips that you have for getting sufficient rest the day or night before a tournament?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad you brought up all that. Like I've been very open, vocal. People can find podcasts online with me talking, not on Disc Golf Podcast, but other podcasts about these topics of mental health because, from military, from ambulance, from all that, I got PTSD. And, and that PTSD at one point turned in out of the blue into, panic attacks and anxiety and all that. And fortunately, I've, through a lot of mental health and a lot of coaching, a lot of therapy and all that, I'm, that a lot of that, most all that is, was a stage in my life that I'm not in right now. But I had to put in the work, and I had to, I couldn't, if let's say I knew something was going to be super stressful, I needed to kind of do the work in the days and the weeks leading up to that, to help me prepare. So I knew it was coming. Right. So, if we're more confident and prepared to move into something, even though everything's going to be stressful like that, like a tournament, no matter what, it's going to be stressful. But if I've worked to develop a routine before my tournament, then I can just call on that routine, right? And they'll talk about that in mental health and stuff. It's like, if someone's experiencing anxiety, that practice that you've done of your breath work and this and that beforehand, you can tap into that more readily than if you've never done it before. You only pull it out of the bag when you need it, so saying, hey, I know I need to improve my sleep. And so I'm actually going to start, because I don't want sleep challenges to affect me as much the day before or the day of the tournament. And so backing it up a week, 2 weeks, whatever, or just, in general, I'm trying to improve my sleep. And then the 3 days before or whatever it works for each person, I start to reduce some social media. I'm starting to, do some more meditation. I'm starting to focus more on, okay, the week that this thing's going on, I'm going to intentionally back off on how much social media usage I'm doing in the evenings. I'm going to maybe not watch anything that could be distressing and affect my sleep. I'm going to do some meditation at night, listen to some positive affirmations on a YouTube, video. I'm going to, make sure that I'm hydrating myself well. So it's usually not the night before thing. It's this is what I'm working on, and then I'm continuing to do that
So
the night before.
Seth, I'm really starting to notice a trend on a lot of the advice that you're giving, that we just have to start doing it at some point intentionally and give it the time that it needs in order for it to grow into that habit, into that routine. And then we will see the increased benefits from that little bitty step of starting.
Absolutely. That's the key right there. And going back and adding to that, like you said, we just need to start doing it. And that's why I hammer so much, kind of focus so much on that, even if it's a little bit, because most people don't start because they think I got to do it all. Like, I got to improve my sleep. So that means I got to go cold turkey on all social media. I got to, get in bed at this time, but I got kids that I got to, we got to do stuff for an evening. So how do I change those schedules? So it's little things. You don't need to do it all right away. You just start and then just build that. So it's not I'm just trying to pull something out right now that I've never practiced or even thought about. And I want to see changes now. I want to see benefits now. It's like, no, it's, it comes from doing stuff before. There's a really good book. It's a very thin book. It's an easy read. It's
I like thin books.
Yeah, there you go. And it's also got a name I can't remember. No, I think I'm pretty confident it's carry water, chop wood, or chop wood, carry water.
I think I've heard of that. Something like that.
Yeah. It's basically like the guy wanted to go and, do this big thing in life. And he goes and meets with the master, and the master has him start just chop wood and carry water. And he's like, well, it's the whole, like,
wax on, wax off.
It's like wax on, wax off, right? It's like those little things that we start just doing now, they have benefits that we don't even know. Like, it just seems so simple now that's like, how could it even come close to working? Because it's just so simple, but it's making a change whether we know it or not. And then now it builds up, and now we can do things later on that we never thought we could do now.
For sure. All right, Seth. Well, we're going to go ahead and ask you some wrap-up questions here. We do definitely appreciate all of your wisdom and time and expertise, sharing all this knowledge with us. It is phenomenal. And it's
absolutely
of great value to our listeners as well. So, Seth, what's your favorite disc?
Yes, great question. I am just now. Okay, so I'll say my favorite disc, and then I'll just kind of touch on something. A funny thing about my choosing my favorite disc and why it's so hard is my favorite disc right now is the Hex by MVP.
Good choice.
I'm loving it. Yes, I love it. I just love the hand feel. I started with kind of like the EMAC Truth back in the day, went to like Verdict and Buzz and all that, and they're all great. But the Hex is just feeling so good. I feel very confident and comfortable when I throw it. Now, why I kind of joke about it is, one of the best things about working in disc golf is you're around disc golf all the time, and one of the most challenging things is you never get to play disc golf. Because you're working in disc golf all the time.
And you have to survive Bill Randolph's dad jokes.
There you go. Yeah, good old Bill. Exactly. One of the funniest things about Bill when he says goodbye to people, sometimes he'll be like, "All right, hey, see you later. Drive fast and take chances." And so it kind of. I've said that before too to people because it throws people off. Drive fast, take chances. Like, what? You're supposed to tell me to drive safe and drive home alive.
Man. Bill's a great guy.
Yeah, Bill's great. The funny thing is, like, choosing a disc is like I'm just now kind of starting. Now I'm settled down after the season and starting to play more because I really didn't get to play much, and I don't get to play as much as I want to because I'm always just working at the disc golf course or around disc golf. And then another thing is when you're on tour full time, I'm there for literally every single special limited edition drop, and every single type of plastic is always out at the courses or this. So I'm like, got to bring a second suitcase just to fill it up with discs that I get from each event, And so I have so many different types that it's like, I'm looking at them like, man, what am I got to rebuild my bag. Like, I've got a lot of options, like all different types. And so I'm kind of going through what I want my bag to look like now. And the Hex is definitely, I've got like 3 of those in there.
Are you partial to any brand or anything?
I'm not. I like, them all. There's some that I just have more of than others, but no, I'm not.
All right. Jenny, did you have something?
Oh, I was going to say that I have recently put the sister disc, the Paradox, back in my bag, and we're both fans of throwing the Paradox.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. I threw that like 4 times yesterday out at a course here. I love that. That's such a great option.
Rollers.
Yeah, exactly right. And I don't, I'm pretty good at taking what should be like a 30-second answer and turning it into about 30 minutes. So, please excuse me on
No, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. So,
but yeah, I don't really throw a lot of forehand unless I'm training for it. Unless I'm doing, a lot of forehand specific work, and really increasing the buffer zone between, the threshold of what my tendons and my elbow and all that can handle. So if I'm not doing a lot of forehand work, intentional work, outside of throwing forehand, then I don't really throw forehand. So I haven't been playing a lot of disc golf recently because of tour life. And so the Paradox is amazing for me when I'm not having any forehand, and I know I can trust. I will throw like a little approach shot forehand with like a Berg or something, but I won't really push it. And so the Paradox is one of those discs where I know that I can get those ante lines whenever I feel like them.
Yeah, I'm still learning forehand from my 12-year-old son, and he's always sitting there. Like, we were out to eat one night and a baseball game was on. He's like, "Mom, you got to watch how he's throwing. That's how you got to throw your disc." And so he's still trying to get me to understand it, and it's just not connecting.
Yeah, and like I've talked to players from the past that, they were just like, we didn't have the forehand option and we were just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And, and you can see players on tour like, James, that does just fine without it. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So, next question is, how has disc golf helped you develop, changed your life, or influenced your life? Getting into it and then moving on to it. Like, what kind of life lessons have you brought with you
From disc golf? Yeah. So many. It's funny. To go back from where I was, kind of one night just mopping the floors of my gym, which I had a 3,500 square foot gym. So it took a little bit to mop, and it was like 10 o'clock at night. I'd gotten there like 5 in the morning, and I had to be there at 5 in the morning the next day. And, thinking about, how can I I want to make an impact in disc golf. And going home and telling my wife, hey, I think I'm going to actually start putting content out for disc golf. And into closing my gym, and to now this is what we do full time and in our life. My wife works in disc golf strong as well. And so it's just been an amazing journey, and it's taught me so much that, I will probably start to understand in 10, 15 years as, I continue to reflect on things. But I would say one thing about this sport is, as we all know, this is definitely something that draws us all in, is the community, and how you can have just something that brings so many people from all over together and speak a common language and have a common love for something, and a passion for something. I shared a photo at DDO this past year, which Jeremy Rusko, the founder of Dynamic Discs, told me I needed to do 20 push-ups at USDGC this year because I called it DDO and not Dynamic Discs Open. So Jeremy, if you hear this, I guess I'll do these 20 push-ups after I get off the podcast. They're trying to move it away from DDO to Dynamic Discs Open. So it was him and the new CEO, and he's like, "Drop it, give me 20." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "You just call it DDO." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I shared a photo from Dynamic Discs Open where it was me and about 20 of my Estonian friends, and I said, never in my life when I first started throwing a Frisbee did I think that I would love going to some small little town in nowhere, Kansas, to hang out with 20 of my friends from Estonia. It's just really cool to think about that and how it's drawn people together in this way.
That's awesome. So, do you have any future plans or goals with disc golf? I mean, you're at the spearhead. Where are you taking this thing?
Yeah, it's it's been pretty interesting to have to with the growth of disc golf, it is. I definitely am aware that I've been at the tip of the spear, and just trying to evolve and make things better and improve things wherever I can, and however I can best help. I just officially today became the head coach of the Boise State University disc golf team. So
congratulations.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so that's so now I'm here. We just settled here in the Boise, the Treasure Valley area in Idaho back in June, and so I taught a clinic for them last week, and they were like, "Hey, would you mind being the head coach here? We need a coach." And I was like, "Absolutely." So now I'm that's another thing I'm doing, is kind of getting into collegiate disc golf and how I can best help, the future of our sport from the college level as well. And then continuing to, share programs and share advice and share things that I think will be, people might find some benefits from, in helping them in their journey in this sport and helping them be a resilient disc golf athlete. That's so important. So
Yeah.
we'll see where it takes me. We'll keep going and moving forward.
Well, speaking of where it takes you, that's a nice segue to talk about Disc Golf Strong. Now, what is Disc Golf Strong for our listeners that don't know? How can we get involved? I saw that there's some programs on there. You can sign up for classes. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Disc Golf Strong is an online athletic performance organization company for the sport, and where we share as much information as we can without it being all too consuming and overwhelming. And so we've got our social media. We've got our Disc Golf Strong Performance Academy, which it started out, it's an online academy. It started out as a 6-week academy that people could go through, and there was about 10 weeks of access to that, and it came with there's coaching videos and a program to follow, like a 6-week program to follow. That's really evolved a lot, and so we're actually in like the next 2 weeks we're going to be launching an all brand new Disc Golf Strong Performance Academy, which is going to be like a year. People have a year access to it. There's different modules. There's like the prime disc golf athlete, the mobile disc golf athlete, the stable disc golf athlete, the powerful disc golf athlete, the prepared disc golf athlete, and the recovered disc golf athlete. And so there's different modules, and then there's different focuses of training and stuff that people can do at home. We really want to meet people where they're at with disc golf training. We're not here to stand on a balance ball on one leg and juggle to try to get better at disc golf. We want to really try to focus on what are the things that we need as disc golfers. What's the mobility, what's the stability, all the things that we've talked about over this, last, time here on the podcast. And we just try to put that out there in a package form for people that they can access at their home. We do have, other like mini courses and things we're putting together, on like shoulder and elbow health and knee, and I'm putting together like a kettlebell course for disc golf. So just things that are going to be coming out in the future, and that's all through our website.
Very cool.
Yeah, I was fishing around your website, and very exciting stuff. And love that someone like you is putting something like that out there and saying, hey, let's get the record straight about disc golf health, disc golf training, and coming from somebody that would it be safe to say that you're an expert?
I think that other people would say that for sure. I think in our own heads, we always just see things that we could always do better and learn more about, and so I probably could be pinned down to say that, but yeah, and I really wanted to make sure from the very beginning that I saw that, hey, I'm right now I'm the only one talking about it at that time in the beginning, of where I was like, okay, I have two paths I could go. I could go the path of what's going to get the most, views and the most Instagram likes, and if we're developing this in the sport of disc golf, could I go the route of people just being wowed and never really doing the stuff that I am putting out there because it involves a lot of complexity and stuff, or I have a really, great opportunity to make sure that we're growing the sport of training in disc golf from the start with sound principles of, that you got in your ACE, certification, and that they talk about it in the colleges and the NSCA and all these, different things, like the sound principles of training and where you should start for athletes. So that's really what I've kind of made sure I held strong to, is focused on that. And then we're excited about the future. We're excited, the last couple of years I've been on the road full time, and I also do a whole other side of the sport, which is the health and safety for the tour, and weather and severe weather and the emergency action plans and stuff. And so I've been focusing on that for a lot, building those things on the tour side. But right now so it's kind of not been putting out a lot of content for Disc Golf Strong recently, because there's so much focus that I have to do for that kind of stuff for the tour as well. But we've just been crushing away at just putting getting new things in the works to start putting out for Disc Golf Strong in the near future. We're excited about it.
Awesome. All right. Well, Seth, we're going to get it wrapped up here. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon and Jenny. It's been a true honor and a pleasure to be on the show with you and talk disc golf and everything we're all passionate about on the health and fitness side and all that. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk and share.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. You were very inspirational. I took a lot of notes.
Awesome. Well, no, I appreciate that. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Intentional Disc Golfer. This has been a great episode with our very special guest, Seth Munsey. And at the Intentional Disc Golfer podcast, we really, truly believe that disc golf saves lives. So go out there and grow the sport.